Have you ever thought of putting an agent to test your agent? Well, we did. And we thought it was such a crazy idea that it might just work. And there's all kinds of applications in LLMs. You could be building a chatbot, but you can also be predicting something. You could be generating something, right? But now people build on top of that and are running agents, which is something that is pretty independent. You give it tools, you put it in a loop, and then it can almost run free and go doing stuff, right? But then the question is, how do you know it's doing the right thing? And so far I haven't seen a good framework, a good way to do about it. There are some that try to make it strict, try to control it a lot, but that totally defeats the purpose. You use agents exactly on tasks where running free, where being independent is a good thing, and you want that. So how do you test that? If you ever build an AI agent, you know how you test that. You send it a message, you see if it worked, then you send another one, and then it didn't, then you go back, you change something, you change the prompt, then you go again, you try to send the same message again, try to execute the same task, wait for everything to happen, and then maybe you get something satisfactory, right? But then the next feature come in, and then you kind of vibe check that too, but you don't know if it broke something else. You always have this concern, but it's like too much effort to go back and test everything, right? So that's why we thought of this idea, having scenarios, which is kind of like what we already do with your agents, right? So you think of a feature and then you have a scenario where you're going to use that. And then along the way, you discover all this issue, all this problem that happens. And then there is the things that you didn't wish should happen, and then you go try and fix the prompt. Would be great if you could test them automatically and make sure that they don't happen again until you move to the next scenario, or you discover the next scenario when you see a user using it in a new way where the agent doesn't reply as you expect, and you want to code that in too, right? And to exercise that, I'm going to show you how can we build an awesome Lovable clone fully tested, and then we are going to build the next scenario to extend it further. So let's go. How does this all work? Well, it's actually very simple. Scenario is just a Python library that connects together with PyTest. We'll be launching a TypeScript version soon as well. All you do is defining your testing agent, so your agent that will be executing those scenarios. Here I'm using GPT-4o Mini, and then your scenario. So first you define how do you call your agent that is being tested right now, right? And then you define the scenario, what's going to happen there. This is the description of the scenario, which will be understood by the testing agent. And then the testing agent is going to simulate your user, is going to try to behave as a user would to follow the scenario, right? So the scenario here is that the user is looking for a dinner idea. And what I'm testing is my agent, which is a vegetarian recipe agent, right? And then the agents will talk to each other. So you have the testing agent send a message to your agent, listening to the response, then giving a reply, and so on. But you need to define where this conversation ends, right? And what does it mean that it went in a good direction or a bad direction? And the thing is, the testing agent by default is also the judge of the conversation. So it's more like an interviewer. So it's trying to simulate the user, but it's kind of like thinking, is this what I expect from that agent? And you define those with the success criteria and the failure criteria. So the success criteria is what the agent is going to try, what the testing agent is going to try to reach as a goal, right? So recipe agent generates a vegetarian recipe. So the user is going to ask like, hey, I need a dinner. And then if your agent replies with, hello, good morning, then it will keep trying like, yeah, but what about that dinner idea, right? So it will keep trying to reach those until it's done. So if you reach all the success criteria, then the test is successful, right? And the failure criteria, it's something that shouldn't happen at any time. So if the recipe includes meat, that's a failure. And if the agent asks for more than 2 follow-up questions, that's also a failure. It doesn't matter if it could fix later. So the failure criteria is something that stops early, right? Like these are things that really shouldn't happen. And then you run your scenario. After that, you could make more tests. You could check if some tool was executed or whatever. But this is enough to get us started, this simple scenario, right? I'm going to show really quick just how this runs, and then we can jump to the Lovable example, right? So here's my scenario test. It's the same test that you see on the README, and with the actual agent running this. To execute it, I'm gonna go to my terminal and I'm gonna run uv run pytest examples test vegetarian recipe agent. And as the test executes, you can actually see the conversation that is happening between the two agents, right? User, in this case, is our testing agent simulating the user. You see that it also writes like the user, right? Like all lowercase, simple, like your users would. And then, so it just started with linear ideas. The agent said, are you looking for a specific cuisine? And then it gave the recipe. Very simple, very good. So now let's go to the Lovable example. Let me show you really quick how that works. Here, very similar, we have a scenario as well. But in this case, the user wants to create a new landing page for the dog walking startup, right? One thing that you can define as well is the strategy. So you're basically telling your test agent how it should approach this problem. We're telling it to send the first message, generate a landing page, but then we also want a follow-up request to extend it, and then give the final verdict. I'm going to reduce the number of turns here to 2, just so it runs a bit faster. Then for the success criteria, we have some checks to see if the files were edited as we expected, right, to create this website. And the way it works behind the scenes is that our Lovable agent has a template that it starts with. So it doesn't create everything from scratch, right? It has this React Vite Tailwind template that it uses to create its first hello world, and then it starts changing on top of that. And then on the success criteria, we write what changes do we expect it to have be done, right? First of all, we expect it to read the files before making the changes, because sometimes AI agents just hallucinate what should be there and then start spitting code all over. So this was an important criteria for us to check that it's actually reading before doing anything with the file. Then it modifies the CSS to give it a nice look, and at the end create a nice landing page and extended it as well, right? Some failures is that the agent can't say read the file. Sometimes it does that. Sometimes it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the power to change files, when it actually does because we have given it the tools, right? And then sometimes it also produces incomplete code or is too late to finish. We are asking our testing agent to check that this is not the case. Now, let me execute this scenario real quick, and then I show you how the Lovable agent works behind the scenes. So I'm gonna run uv run pytest as examples test Lovable clone, and then you see here that it created a copy of our template folder. Let's open here on the side. Meanwhile, let me go to this folder, and then our testing agent asked it to create a landing page for my dog walking business, and now our agent is at work. It's doing stuff. This is using Claude to build, which is a bit on the slow end but super powerful. Meanwhile, let's look at our template. If I do some ls here, I see that I have my files, all right? And then I can already install my dependencies to start running this website. Let me just show you how the initial template looks like. Let me open here on localhost. Oh, it's actually already done. If you look on what happened on this conversation, let me scroll up a little bit. The agent said, I'll help you create a landing page. And then you can also see the two calls that happen, right? So it created a Tailwind file, it updated CSS. And then our user, or our simulated user, asked it to add testimonial section with real reviews. I don't know how it's going to find real reviews, but you can see that we already have a super nice looking website called Paws and Paths. Super cute. There's even a book a walk. That's nice. Oh, it refreshed, so I think, yeah, it added the reviews from our customers. That's good. And now the agent said I've created a testimonial, blah, blah, blah. Let's see what our testing agent thinks. Cool, success, 5/5. So our testing agent thinks that our main agent successfully done its job. It completed, you can fully read the reasoning here, it completed 5 out of 5. Says success criteria. That's super good. So now let me show you how this Lovable agent actually works under the hood, and then I want to expand it with one more scenario. Let's go. By the way, all this is example code in our repository. Check it out, give us a star, and let's go. So the Lovable agent is using Pydantic. We're using Pydantic AI to build. Scenario works with everything. It doesn't really matter. But basically here we have Claude 3.5 and our big prompt to do the coding, right? Here we explain little things. You are a coding assistant, you'll be given React, TypeScript, Vite, and all those are learning or you're testing the scenarios, right? We realize that it would hallucinate which CSS library you're using. So if you are explicit with Tailwind and Redux, then it does a better job. Or that you must use components from component UI folder, right? That made it a much better agent. And then we also told it that on the first request should change the CSS. Otherwise, it would use the default style, which is, it wouldn't be as cute for the dog business. And this became one of our criteria on the scenario, right? Then we have some more definitions of the execution flows. And then the way it works is by using tools, right? We have some tools that we give to the agents here, namely read file, update file, and create file. Those are the bare minimum you need to create a lovable clone, because basically all it's doing is going through this template and doing whatever it wants there, right? It's reading files, it's updating files, creating files. I didn't even implement delete, so at some point we might want to add that. However, you can see that the code inside this tool calling is very simple. It's just literally calling those file paths and then doing the changes, reading the files, or returning the error so the LLM knows it did something wrong and then it can try to fix itself, right? And then here, all we do when a new user message comes in is we take the user message plus the file tree back to the LLM of the template they're working on so they can visualize the structure and better think what to do next. Last but not least, we convert the messages that came out from the agent into the OpenAI format back, and then we return it to where it's used on the scenario. This way, by returning the messages here, you can fully see all the tool calls that happen, and the testing agent can see it as well. So no matter what library are you using, all of them in a way or another are OpenAI compatible or can be converted to. If you return those messages, then the testing agent can fully understand what's going on. Or if you can't do that, you can just return a string with all the information that you want, and also some extra artifacts that you can read more about on the documentation. But anyway, this is enough, as you saw, to have a fully running lovable example. But what if I want something extra? I want another scenario. You can see that this website, even though it has some people images, it doesn't actually have a nice cover image here. It lacks images, right? I want more images. And one thing that Lovable does is using Unsplash for the images, which is this website here that has an API where we can query those beautiful placeholder images. I have the API here. It's very simple. What I want to do is make my agent use that for placeholder images. So let me start with another scenario. I'm going to annotate my test as an agent test and then mark as an async.io and test lovable clone with placeholder images. So I'm going to do pretty much the same as the other test. In fact, I'm just going to tab this one away. User wants to create a new landing page for their pugs gallery photo website. I'm going to keep the same criteria, and then my success criteria is the landing page has placeholder images, and the placeholder images should be Unsplash images. Thank you for reading my mind. And failure if it does not have and they're not Unsplash. That seems a bit redundant. Let me just keep the first one. Okay, that's it. That's all there is to it. Before we start, I want to show you something. As we're building this new scenario, right, it might take some work to get the first version running. So one thing we can do is enable the debug mode. The debug mode will let us take control instead of the testing agent, so we can decide to step in and type the message ourselves to try and exercise this scenario. But notice that I wrote the scenario before I write the code. This is scenario-driven development we're doing here. We're first thinking of the test, what we expect out of it, right? And then we're going to implement about it. Because what if our agent is so smart that already solves this? Maybe we don't need to write any code, right? Well, let's see. So I'm gonna run just this scenario. I can do that by specifying exactly what I want to run over here. Let me close this up for a second and let me start running this. So you see that immediately I enter on debug mode. I'm going to let the AI take over on this one actually, so I just press enter and let it generate the first message. Create a landing page for my Pugs photo gallery website. Very direct, as a user would be. Now the agent's thinking for a moment, and meanwhile let's open up this template on the side once again. So I'm going to navigate to it, install the dependencies, and then let's start it up. So it's still the initial blank page of the template as the agent is working. Oh, there we go. We actually already have some Pug images. That's very interesting. I did not expect that to just work. Where are those images coming from? Wow. Okay. Okay, seriously, I did not expect that because in other tests it didn't do that. But that's even more proof that you should write the scenario first, and you might find out that it breaks in different ways than you expected to, right? And then maybe you fix only what's needed. However, since this already worked, let me hit enter again, see what the testing agent thinks of it. Okay, it asks for more Pug photos, of course, never enough. And while it's doing, I'm going to explain what I was going to do in the video if it hadn't already worked. Okay, it's adding more Pug images. What I would do to fix this, if it was broken, would be go to my Lovable clone agent, and then here I was going to add a new tool called agent, get on splash image that gets a random splash image, and then I would implement my HTTP call, so like response equals HTTPX get. I even had the API key for that and all, but it seems that I don't need to do that. And then I was going to add on the prompt like, hey, when you need a placeholder, please use this. Surprisingly, this works well already. So I guess that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Check out our GitHub repo. We are going to launch literally after I finish this video. You see that it's still private, so I'm going to make it public. Please help us with some stars. And that's it. Happy testing.